What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTB Ravens Media, bringing you Ravens content every single day. If you want to see that daily Ravens content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. Hit the notification bell as well if you want to get notified every single time I upload a brand new video. In this video today, I'm super excited. Todd Monken had his introductory press conference. And if you guys didn't know, whenever the Ravens have these like press conferences that are important, or they have daily press conferences in OTAs and stuff like that, I like to make recap videos to kind of let you know, because I know a lot of people don't have the half an hour, maybe they don't have the hour to listen to all the interviews and do all that stuff. I have the time. So I like to say, the things that I took away from it. I strongly recommend watching the video or watching the live stream. It's on the Ravens YouTube channel. So go check that out if you want to. But here are the biggest things that I was able to take away from it. I want to hear in the comment section as well your guys' thoughts, because I saw a lot of people in the live chat talking about it. But first off, John Harbaugh started off the press conference and talked about things. And one of the things that I liked that he talked about was he said that, when they're doing the interview process, he was just talking ball. And he was talking ball with Monken, and he talked about, talking about no huddle, under center, line of scrimmage calls, running RPOs and things like that. And he just mentioned things that it's like, okay, these are things that, we as fans have been looking for. And he also mentioned that the fan base will be really excited with what Monken brings. So, I felt like that was worthwhile bringing in, where like John Harbaugh is aware of the fan base's concerns. He's absolutely aware, and he brought it up, and he mentioned the things that we've been looking for specifically. And so I thought that was good that, a lot of people say like Harbaugh never notices, Harbaugh never recognizes, our frustration. He did. And I want to commend Harbaugh for that. Now, getting into Todd Monken's side of things, and I apologize, guys. I'm going to be looking over to my other monitor because that's where I have all my notes that I took. So people talked about it. They asked him, it's been a few years since you were in the NFL. How has things changed since going back to college and then coming back? And he talked about how, the game's very different. And, overall, the use of no huddle is increasing, using players' athleticism, all these things of like what we think of as the modern game. It's always adapting, it's always changing, it's always, getting better. And I think it's very valuable because something that we, and myself and Joshua, and, I know a lot of you, we wanted a young offensive coordinator. Why? Because we felt like, a lot of the older guys, they feel like they don't adapt, and they look at it and they say, no, this is my system. That's what I'm going to do. That's not what we have with Todd Monken. Todd Monken, and I'll talk about some other things that he brought up later. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited for Todd Monken. That was a great press conference. That was by far the best press conference I've seen, you know, from the Baltimore Ravens organization. And I've watched a lot of them. I've watched basically every single one of the last 5+ years. So overall, very impressive. But he talked about how the game does change, and it comes from college, and it comes from players' athleticism and using the no huddle. And he talked about schematically. Next up was just like his general philosophy. He mentioned a lot of things, how to have a good offense. And it's like, don't turn the ball over. You want to make sure that you have a good balance, all those things. But he re-emphasized two things. He said, how do you be explosive without turning the ball over? That's how you win. And I fully agree with him, because the thing that the Ravens offense did not have the last 2 years and did have in 2019 was they were wildly explosive in 2019. They by far led the league in explosive plays, which is 20 plus yards. And they just dominated teams by getting those chunk plays. Last couple of years, they haven't been doing that. They've been pretty decent at not turning the ball over, but they haven't been able to get those downfield shots or big runs that used to propel them into winning a lot of games. So, I thought that was really good that he said that. I really agree with that philosophy, because it shows from the jump his goal is to be explosive. That's critical. And then the biggest thing with Todd Monken, and we talked about this when we hired him, he always changes. He never ran the same offense. And so he talks about play to the strengths that you have. And he brought up Tampa Bay and brought up like, yeah, we threw the ball a lot because we had great wide receivers. And he was like, we had Deshaun Jackson, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Humphreys, good tight ends as well. So he's like, so we threw the ball. And then later people asked about, oh man, you had, last year you had great tight ends in Georgia. And now you have, Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. How do you see that benefiting Isaiah Likely? And he kind of reinforced this idea where he goes, well, the guys at Georgia were our best players. So they were able to get the ball a lot. And that mentality right there, he didn't talk about Isaiah Likely. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but he was more about emphasizing rather than talking about specific players. He didn't talk about any specific players outside of Odell Beckham Jr. And Lamar Jackson. He didn't talk about anybody in terms of like, oh man, with him, what we're going to do is this. That's not what he was going after. He basically emphasized, yeah, I use those guys because they were my best players. Balance in his eyes is not about, from old interviews, not this press conference, in press conference with the Browns, he talked about balance is getting the ball to multiple people, not about run pass. In this press conference, he said balance isn't run pass, it's using the full field. It's spreading out the field and making sure that you have all those open lanes so that defenders aren't looking at it. You can think about it like it's almost follows a run pass, right? If you run the ball, you're going to stay close to the line of scrimmage. The linebackers are going to shift in. If you're throwing the ball, then maybe backing up. But you want to run the ball. You want to get the ball out wide, short. You want to get the ball across the middle, short, whether that's running it up the middle or hitting a quick, drag route or whatever it is. You want to hit the ball in every level so that defenders have to stay at every level. Also mentioned something that I love that he said at kind of towards the very end. He goes, the better you run, the better you throw. Which I fully agree with. Like this is going to most likely be a run run heavy attack, which doesn't mean more runs than passes, but the run's going to set up the throw. It's how it works with most of the great offenses in the NFL. That's how it works in the Shanahan system. That's how it worked with the Philadelphia Eagles last year. The Chiefs don't do that. The Chiefs are special, okay? But basically every other team outside of the Chiefs and the Bills, it's run, set up the throw. And, going back to kind of the personnel and, his philosophy, he talked a lot about using players' athleticism, and obviously Lamar Jackson gets brought up. And he talked about Lamar felt like he was underrated as a passer. But he talked about how the way that the quarterback position is developed, it's no longer like these big statues. And he talked about athletic quarterbacks, and he said athletic quarterbacks can get you out of trouble. And then he mentioned if you create space, that will help basically the quarterback make plays. If you start spreading the field, then the quarterback, if he starts, making his own play, that's an even bigger play. I feel like when we were watching Greg Roman, a lot of times, like Lamar may make a play, but then everybody's standing at one side and he just like runs into a defender. Monken was like, no, you want to create space so that it allows your quarterback to be even more dynamic, basically, if he's going to make that extra play. He was asked about Odell Beckham Jr. I loved his response. He basically goes like, yeah, he wants the ball. Every receiver wants the ball. like that's not a bad thing in his eyes. And it seems like in recent years, wide receivers have been criticized by coaches for wanting the ball and demanding the ball. Man, why aren't we being used? Right? Monken is like, no, you want players that want the ball. Again, I think that's something that's really, really interesting that, I think is really important to focus on. It's like he obviously watched Ravens film and he talked about, people were kind of pressing him. What can he build off in the passing game? That's what we want to see. And he's kind of avoiding it. And he ends up saying basically, we have to build passing concepts that fit together, which is hilarious because it like kind of takes shots at Greg Roman because Greg Roman's passing concepts did not fit together, unless you mean fit together in the fact that they were all the same. But it's like he wants his quarterback and all the playmakers and all the players to be able to look at plays and be like, okay, that makes sense why we're running it. We want to run a flood, and then we're going to run, I don't know, any sort of any sort of passing card. Maybe you want to run stick, after running flood or whatever, and have it make sense. You don't want to basically be just running random plays where the quarterback is like, okay, we're running that, and it's not allowing him to see. Because if you're running similar concepts, that's putting maybe Lamar's trying to read the linebacker covering either the running back or the tight end. If you're running similar concepts that are making him recognize, he may be like, okay, when Mark Andrews starts outside, the linebacker's playing farther in. That means later in the game, what I can do is I can recognize that and we call a similar concept, but instead it's going to go maybe Mark Andrews takes it a little bit higher and Lamar's able to hit him. Having plays where like you can start to recognize those tendencies of the defensive players is really valuable for a quarterback. That's what made Peyton Manning so great. That's what made, Tom Brady so great. And all these, all-time great quarterbacks was they were so smart. They were able to adapt and they were able to recognize if you have past concepts that fit together, you can utilize them in and of themselves to help advance basically what you're doing. The final thing that I want to talk about that he brought up, which I fully agree with, is the NFL is based around fantasy football. People want to see points. I thought that was funny. He said 41-40 final score. Fans are happy. 7-6 they aren't. They look at that 41-40 game and they say this team played very good. And yet 7-6 is looked at like they sucked. He's coaching to win games. And, with how the Ravens play, there may be some games where he's not trying to drop 50 on them because that's not how you have to win every game. We have to recognize that we have a great defense. So putting up a ton of points, putting up 35 points, 45 points, if the Ravens win 21-10, it's a good game. Right? Rather than like I'd rather win 21-10 than 35-34. Even though the offense did better, maybe the offense was scoring too quickly. The defense gets gassed. It hurts the defense. He also talked about at the very beginning, like why the Ravens was so good and why he chose Georgia was like, I want to play in a culture where for an organization that has culture and has a defense and has an identity. And the Ravens do that, and Georgia had that. And he's going to coach to win, and he's going to coach to put up more points than the opponent, right? Not the most points possible. You want to strategically score points. I think some offensive coordinators, some teams have problems with that where they try and keep scoring, and then they don't know how to let up. Look at the Chargers. They don't know how to let up. And so instead, they lose because they try and run the ball, but they can't really do it. So in order for them to win, it's just like, oh my gosh, we have to score every single possession. That's how the Chargers blow so many leads. Is Brandon Staley is incompetent when it comes to keeping a lead because he just doesn't understand situational football when you're winning by a lot. Todd Monken, at least from this, he understands that there's ways to win. And he's done that, and he did that at Georgia. He won coming back from behind. That's how he beat Ohio State. He's also won from being ahead. That's how he beat TCU in the national championship game. You can win in a multitude of ways. You can score points in a multitude of ways. And I think he understands that. And he's all about utilizing personnel. The best players are going to get the ball the most. There's not going to be situations where we go, man, why are we not seeing James Prochet? If James Prochet isn't getting the ball, it's because he's not the best. If we're seeing specific play, like Greg Roman was all about, okay, I have my scheme now, but let me just find a player and throw him in. Todd Monken is all about building the scheme around the players. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe for daily Ravens content, and I'll see all of you again next time.